Hey guys, so welcome to week 2 of the Gertie Sew Along for Butterick B6453. This is going to be covering the sewing process of view A. If you saw my video last week, thank you guys so much for all the comments that you left. It means a lot that the video that I did was really helpful. I did not realize so many people were having problems with full bust adjustments, but I will be doing more of those sort of videos. So if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and please subscribe to the channel. This video specifically is, as I said, going to cover the sewing process itself. I do not have this dress hanging up just because I followed the order of process that Gertie did in her instructions. That's not how I would do it personally, though. I definitely want to give you guys a heads up on that. I am actually concerned about the dress at this point, not because it looks bad or anything like that, but because it is not reinforced at the neckline besides the stay stitching that I did at the very beginning. I would have normally put on the facing pieces before continuing to add the skirt, just because the skirt weighs down the top a lot and I did not want the neck to stretch out. So I am literally just kind of having to move it around like this rather than having it hang up like I normally would. To accompany this video, just like I did last week, I recorded a second smaller video for the girls who had to do a full bust adjustment. It is specifically tailored to how to adjust and recreate a new facing piece to match this adjusted pattern piece. So, you know, in my case, if you guys saw the last video, I had to do some crazy adjustments. It's a huge full bust adjustment that I had to do, so I had to redraw the entire facing in order to be able to sew that into this. So, yeah, it's a short video. It's about 7 minutes long. I'll go ahead and link it down in the description below, and it should pop up somewhere in this window for you guys to check that out, and hopefully it'll be useful, you know, for the next steps. Anyway, so I'll go ahead and just kind of get started on this, and the whole process sewing it was actually not too long. It's a lot of basic sewing, but I did kind of leave some of the specific tips that I did, you know, that helped me out. So hopefully it's helpful for you guys too. So first things first, cutting everything out. You can see I'm using a rotary blade to cut out all the pattern pieces. And on this, this whole, you know, layout of fabric, I will also add it in my facing pieces just to get them cut out. You know, as I said in the intro, please go ahead and watch the video about how to redraft your pattern, your facing pieces, and because yeah, it's just better to just cut them out all at once. So here I am clipping in my notches and my seam allowances. Now, clipping your seam allowances is not necessary, but it's just something that I do. It was something that my sewing teacher kind of just got us into having to do back when I was learning how to sew, so it just kind of stuck with me, but it helps me know where to start and finish a line in case I don't see the measuring on the sewing machine. Also, I'm going ahead and do tailor's tacks throughout. I just prefer tailor's tacks because I don't want to pierce giant holes in my fabric using some of the other tools. And then also like the washable markers, I don't care for them. They never seem to last very long for me, so I just go ahead and got used to doing tailor's tacks. They're actually pretty quick and simple to do, and they're tricky like the first time, but after you get it down, it's so simple. So here I am making tailor tacks for my darts and just for notches that are inside the fabric. Cool, so here are all my pattern pieces cut out. All right, so from there you want to go ahead and make sure that your machine is set up properly, the right needle and all that sort of thing. But here I've already sewn up the bodice, and you can kind of see me flipping it around. I also did a quick peek in there about reinforcing the back, and then I also did some stay stitching like I said in the intro. Pinked all the seams just because it's cotton and it's not going to be unraveling with the poplin. And there is the center back with the interfacing. Alright, so for the straps, I went ahead and just winged it. I didn't trace off the pattern pieces just because I want them to be, you know, a little bit more flexible. So I went ahead and just cut mine out at about 1.5 inches of width, and then just however long I had left over. I made sure that my straps were going to be a total of 1/2 inch wide. So I used my little measuring tape there before I started to sew that entire strap. Even though this piece here that I'm sewing is really long, at the very least I can trim it down to the size that I want ideally, but I just use just a basic long strip of fabric to make the strap. So after you've sewn that line, if you're doing it in the way that I am, I went ahead and just trimmed down the strap in order for me to be able to turn it, which I'll be doing here shortly. I know some people seem to have problems with turning their straps, so I use this tool. It's a pretty common tool, and it can be a little bit tricky to learn how to use right off the bat, but you know, even for this, I cut out that part of the footage, but I definitely struggled for like the first couple pulls when I started to turn everything. But you know, after you get it, it's simple. My tip would just be to hold the hook as it's being pulled and don't yank on it, just kind of guide it in gently, and then from there you'll be able to start flipping everything out. So as I'm flipping it inside out, I'm holding onto the hook and then flipping the rest of the fabric. And here we go, finished up, and finishing turning that inside out. It's actually kind of feels really rewarding when it actually turns without any problems. Cool, and so from there, after you finish that up, just go ahead and press it really well, and then do your top stitching. I just did one line of top stitching. You can do both if you want. Just make sure to go slowly, to go straight, and not get that all uneven, because it shows. Like, this is definitely going to show. So there I have my finished bodice top, and I am attaching the straps, and you want to attach them on the right side of the fabric, just because when you put on the facing later on, it'll kind of hide that section there. Cool, so you can see I did a tie strap. I did not do the sliders just because I just generally don't care for them too much. I'll probably do it in the black version though. So here I am measuring the pattern piece for the skirt. Now the skirt pieces are just plain rectangles, so I opted not to trace out that pattern piece. What I did instead was I drew out a little diagram, measured out the pattern size, and then what I also did was grab a scrap of tracing paper and traced off the notches, because that's really the only important part. Besides the dimensions of that giant rectangle, you just need the copy of those notches. So this is how I do it. If you want to trace off the whole thing or just cut out the sheets, I mean, that's totally cool. But for me, I just did not want to deal with that. So I just went ahead and just traced off a copy of the notches. And then when I was working on cutting out the giant pieces, all I had to do was use a measuring tape to figure out the dimensions from there. So if you do it this way, you want to go ahead and just make sure to note what side of that pattern piece this is on and what side, you know, like what pattern piece it is. And that way, you know, moving forward, I know that I can just reference the notch sheet versus cutting out in a giant piece of paper. From here, I am just tearing my fabric just to make it easier to cut. You know, if you're using a woven fabric, you can go ahead and just rip it straight and it's fine. So I'm putting those rectangles together and adding my pockets and getting them to line up, pinning everything in place. And you'll kind of see how I pin my fabric. You just want to make sure that you pin it within the seam allowance, because you don't want to rip holes into the main part of the fabric. And I put mine at diagonal just because it's easier for me to pull later on. So there I am, I pressed it and added my pocket pieces together. So from there, just a quick little pinning action down the side of the skirt and the pocket, and then you just stitch all the way down that line. You know, as I showed in the bodice, I just went ahead and pinked all the seams just because it's easier for me to do on a woven fabric. You don't have to spend time finishing those edges. If you want to, you're totally cool to do that, but because it's just a quick project and it's a simple cotton, I didn't want to spend too much time working on that. So just a simple trim with the pinking shears is enough. All right, so we are almost done. So next is opening up that stitch length, making that a long stitch length, and then putting in your basting. I do mine at about, first one I do about 1/4 of an inch, the second line I do at about like 1/8 or so. Tips for doing gathering: definitely do the 2 lines, and also when you're doing this step here where you're pulling the fabric along, you want to have a firm grip on the threads, but you don't want to yank because you don't want those threads to snap as you're pulling the fabric across. So in this portion here, I am matching up the side seams of the bodice with the side seams of the skirt. And then I will be spreading those ruffles evenly across the bodice. Now this part is actually super important. It kind of gets downplayed just because, oh, you know, just attach the skirt to the top. That's really easy to do, but the problem is if you go too fast and you don't take the time to make sure that your gathers are even and that they are facing the correct the correct direction, they will be sewn in all crooked, and then you'll have to unpick a bunch of areas. So you can see here I'm like fiddling with it as I'm moving the gathers across those basting stitches, and then as I kind of stretch it out, I'm looking at, you know, how it's going to look against the bodice, and here I am kind of trying to pull those gathers down just because they'll be easier to work with. So kind of when I get it generally how I want it, go ahead and pin it down and stretch and spread gathers. You see I unpinned that just to make sure that the skirt would match the top correctly. Now don't pull too hard on the bodice pieces when you're doing this portion, just because you don't want to stretch out that bottom seam either. Even though on this version it's a straight grain, like if you're working on something in a different type of fabric, you also don't want to ruin your main fabric. Cool, so from here I've gone ahead and just pinned everything generally where it's going to be, and then I actually, once I get this last pin in there, I go ahead and flip it, because ultimately I need to make sure that those ruffles are facing the correct direction. So I actually added some more pins in this step here as I double checked that those gathers were kind of going down, because, you know, as you're sewing them they might have a tendency of turning diagonal as you work. So this is a tip that I learned from one of my first sewing teachers, was actually to steam your ruffles before you sew them, because it kind of holds them in place better, right? So you have to imagine that especially on cotton, that steam is going to shrink the cotton just slightly, and it's also going to create memory crease for those ruffles. So as you're pushing them through the sewing machine, or they're going through the sewing machine, they're not going to get pulled out of place. So anyway, so here you can see that the skirt has been attached to the top. As I said, I wish I could hang this to show you guys, but I don't want to distort the top just because the facing's not on there. I would still recommend putting the facing on before putting on the skirt, just for future reference. So I hope this video was super helpful for you guys. You know, definitely leave any questions that you guys might have down below. I know that there was a lot of stuff that I didn't cover, but if there's something specific that you want to see, as I said, leave it down below. I'm probably going to be recording more of these like short videos on the side that are specifically tailored to specific techniques. So if there's like one thing that's really getting to you, just go ahead and leave it down below and I can record a quick video for that. But yeah, I hope you guys liked it. Thumbs up, subscribe, like the page, subscribe, whatever, all the places and stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one next week. Bye guys.